It's Friday. Anyways. Alright, I think we're starting here. Hi, sorry, I'm 2 minutes late and I apologize. I'm not one that likes to be late. Thanks everybody for hanging out and holding your horses. Alright, I hope everybody's had a good week. It's been an interesting week. It's been a long week, but it's been one of those weeks where you just, So, yeah. I appreciate everybody popping in and saying hi today, and I hope that you're now having a productive day as well as the end of a productive week. So, I finished a few different things this morning, amongst other things. So, yeah, good day. It's been a good day, and I've been trying to tabulate a list of the people that I can confirm have picked up the new book, and I'm just a little bit overwhelmed by the support and the encouragement, and the acceptance of the new book, and it's very nice. I really greatly appreciate that. Just remembered another name. Yeah, so, and I'll be listing those, and we're going to do something fun in appreciation of all of that. So, stay tuned. Today's page is Tim's. I just thought I'd call it Tim's. Tim's it's about Tim's shoes, and it's one of these fun ideas to play with the idea of in a suggestion that has a sort of lovely descriptive prowess, like here's the idea, it's an ordeal to go and pick up the size of shoes that this person Tim requires, and it feels like we have to go to an alternate universe in order to get them. That's wonderful. So that's how I came across today's page, and I did this in, if you go onto Patreon, you can see the original art with the zipatone and everything else, but when I converted this to a black and white, in this case brown line art, it unifies everything, and so you really don't see the clear distinctive differences between the zipatone and the non-zipatone parts of the image. It just sort of, it makes it nice and unilateral and flat in value, and I like that. So yeah, it's feeling good, feeling groovy. So hopefully the sound's coming through, and everything's coming through in the video. I'm muted for myself, so I can't hear myself, so hopefully that you can hear me okay. But the other thing that I've been working on that I stitched together is this scanned image, and this scanned image is just one of my drawings, just a sketch of something. And I do this where I'll sit down with random pieces of paper, whatever different sizes, and I'll sketch out just ideas, just characters, and there's no necessity for it to have some sort of result. There's no real intention on it being something specific. And so with that, it's just having fun. It's just exploring and allowing myself to composite these different parts of it together, and that's fun. To me, that's a good time. It just helps you to build up your skill set, or it helps you to develop a little bit further your facility for drawing, by just giving yourself these sort of tasks. So that's what that is. Hi, Maritza, welcome aboard. It's great to see you. Hola. So one of the things I thought we might do today, usually when I'm drawing a one-page story, oftentimes I will get off a track that we're on, and I will get onto a different track of trying to address storytelling techniques or approaches or structural questions that we might have about assembling pages. Let me get this mic closer. I'm sorry in case you can't hear me too well. And so with that, with the fact that I will engage in things and take a sideways turn all the time and have no problem doing so, I thought maybe I should be a little bit more purposeful to engaging in some of these things in the first place, and to walk through maybe some of the sketching process that I go through in my head, where I'm figuring things out. Hi, Chris, welcome aboard. So, with that in mind, let me switch to the overhead. And oh, hey, it's the book. Yep, thought I'd show the book one more time. I'm really pleased. I just finally got confirmation that my stuff is going to come in, and the order that I've made. And in addition to that, I've got Paul Pate's book coming to me as well, and I'm very excited about that. It's his third book, and I really enjoyed reading the first two. Yeah, number 3. It's and he's gonna retire working on this project for a little while because it's so big. He's done 650 pages, something like that, 650, 660 pages on the Detective Perez character between these 3 200 plus page books. The third one, he says, is the smallest one, and it only has 200, but it's still a lot of pages. So I'm really happy for Paul, and yeah, so I ordered his third book. With the generation of a lot of these pages, and the diversity of some of the character stuff that's in there. Hi, Linda, welcome aboard. I don't know if you had a chance yet to see your page today. But it's there. It's out there. It's called Tim's. I thought that was a fun title. So some of the stuff comes from just sitting down and putting marks on paper and sketching and playing with ideas, more so than being worried about an exact compositional notion that you're chasing down and an exact narrative that you're pursuing. And something like this, I wanted to draw this guy hopping down and then taking off. That's my objective for this drawing, and then the rest of it assembles around there, and sometimes when you do something like this, you'll find a narrative point you want to make that doesn't entirely have a lot to do with the page itself. So there's some fun in that. The other example that so you see some of the pencil pages and some of the different approaches. This is an assembly of a bunch of smaller images, a bunch of smaller sketched images that I've put together. And when you look at them in a larger context of me just sitting here drawing different vampires because the notion was interesting to me at the moment, but when you assemble them together, and you can try to figure out, well, what kind of structural narrative can I use these for? This worked well with the suggestion about vampires giving dental advice, and so of course that works. Why wouldn't vampires give dental advice? And then I figured out a motif for embedding an image in behind the text itself, and little tricks like this I picked up during this one. So this is where you take these random sketched things that you've got kicking around, these random illustrations or just workups that you're doing, and how can you utilize those in a uniform way. So this is where you'll see some pages like this one, or the horror monster one, and all these vampire guys, by the way, were something I was just doing amongst all these horror monsters, just to draw them. But 2 pages came out of this, but I think the initial suggestion was horror movie characters. And I went, oh, this vampire one came in, that's great. So we can assemble some of these sketches that we do and utilize them in some certain way. Now, I've shown my sketchbook on here before, And so with the sketchbook, and I'm flipping through quickly on purpose, so bear with me. With the sketchbook, it's an awful lot of just, sorry, I lost my screen, putting together images of structures, or putting together images of figures or characters, or assessing images that I'll see in different things I might be reading and try to do my own little interpretation of that, or is writing down some ideas. And so a sketchbook should be used. It's seldom that I do finished images. It's seldom that I do stuff like these. Very seldom that I do that. And the reason behind that is that, well, there's a preciousness to this, and I'm trying to do a specific thing in this approach, and that is trying to figure out how to encapsulate a character with a single image, and to illustrate what it is that's about them. In this case, the things go through, like this lady can go through walls, or things go through her. This guy's got lightning. This guy's a giant. Etc., etc. And so I'll do a few more on this page here, and then that's that. Because seldom do I do an image that I don't eventually go and cover over, which is where you'll see these are two finished pages that are underneath the surface of these drawings. There's the guy on the space tractor and his wife, and complaining about all these alien babies landing in their field. Or I'll do stuff like exploring graphic elements that I can incorporate into stories, and trying to look for that, a form of expressive language to illustrate explosions or silhouetted images, or how can I interpret different kinds of effects through mark making. And so I keep around a couple of different things, and one of which is this. And so in here are some water-based chisel tip or pointed tip markers. There are a bunch of Fudenosuke pens, because they have a really lovely brush tip, but these are all colored ones as opposed to the black ones that I use for inking pages. In addition to that, there are a number of colored pens, colored ballpoint pens, and colored jelly roll pens, like jelly point pens, similar to like the jelly roll white that I use, but these are all colored inks, and so they're a little bit more opaque, and they got a little bit more tooth to them. And so when I'm exploring mark making like this, they'll give these really nice crisp darker values of orange, as opposed to the light orange from one of these water-based markers. Hiya Jim, welcome aboard. Hiya Marsh, welcome aboard. How's everybody doing? So I'll explore things like this, and while sketching and exploring in the book, and so I'll keep something like this kicking around upstairs by the television, or it's nice and transportable, so I'll just pick this up with me with a sketchbook and go while Lori and I are watching television together. I'm scribbling in the book and pursuing things in a way that I don't necessarily get the opportunity to do so when I'm working on a finished page. And so having that ability, that affordance of a few moments to just play, to just give myself the chance to scribble and doodle something outside the confines of a specified narrative, lets me more comprehensively figure out the things that I'm drawing. So in this case, I'm designing giant robot, giant, they're like 7-8 foot tall in my head, robot. This is the future of policing, by the way, in this one, thought, approach that I had. And so in the future of policing, hence the POL across the chest that will be on each person, this truly faceless and less defined figure, it's just a plastic sheathing on a robot chassis, and that's your inhumane police state of the future. This would be the people that would enact that out. And so it was just exploring that idea and seeing where I could develop that and take that. And so that's why all of these different viewpoints and looking around, and what would be if its head looked up, or what would it be if it looked off to the side, what facility does it have, like I even debated in my head, should they have a kind of a colored loquacious subject or substance, underneath the surface of the subjective body that they have, the plastic form that they have. Should the inside be full of color, like colored magic water? I don't know what it is. And if there's a good one, should he have a different, like one that goes against his programming to fight against the forces of oppression or something like that, if that was to be a story? And should that have a different color? This is all the sort of idea stuff that goes through my head when I'm sketching up one-page story ideas. And so doing enough of these and doing enough of this little sort of exploration, just explosions and shape language to define effect. When we do enough of this sort of stuff, it helps to remove that thinking for us. I don't necessarily have to think too much about an explosion per se, because I've spent a few minutes of drawing different kinds of explosions or different ways that I can interpret that. And one of the things about looking at older books, like let's say the Jack Kirby one that I showed a couple of days ago, you can see the ways that he draws things. And is there any idea in that of interpreting it through my own lens, for the way I express myself, that may be of real benefit to me? Hi Tori, welcome aboard. So I need to consider things like that, but it's not such a laborious thing, because I've already played in that schoolyard there. I've already explored the dynamics of that a little bit, like just this effect here, and so having the opportunity to just give yourself the free form to just make some marks with different tools together, or to try different combinations. Let me zoom for a second on this, because I tried something here that I think has worked, but I haven't used it yet. And that is, I used one of those stencils that I bought in St. Thomas recently at the Craft Hive. I used a really light gray marker, and I put these effects in here. So as this guy's going, boom, here's all this sort of a explosive technique applied through these elements, the stars, the lines of dynamic tension or action in different ways. Here's the gray ones, here's the black ones, ballpoint pen, really lightly colored gray marker. There's some white paint over there to put some interesting characteristics in whatever this cloud or explosion or wreckage, not so clearly defined in my head. Driving on the highway with Lori, not only did I have one of those robots stuck in my head again, but just drawing cars as they're going past us on the highway, and trying to find some shape language in order to illustrate light and how the light moves off of the headlights of the car in darkness or in rain. In this context, it was raining, and so I thought, well, look at how the lights have this sort of different illumination, but at the same time it's stretched. And so how can I illustrate that? And how can I have some sort of interesting approach where I eliminate, fully detailing the front of the vehicles, because they are washed out with that light? And just explaining, expressing myself in different ways of trying to explore some of those ideas. And it's those things that sort of engage us and enable us to see where we go forward. So with this in mind, okay, and talking about the application of sketching and talking about the application of when you do sketch ideas and figures and characters in like the example that I'm showing here. Hiya, Paul, welcome aboard. Cool vehicles. Cool, Paul. Paul, your book arrives on Sunday. So when I'm doing sketches like this, so what I did afterwards, after I did the sketches, I randomly painted over them in yellow. Why'd you do that, Chris? I don't know. I just did. And so it's just an application of just exploring. And I thought, well, here's this random sheet of paper with these figures on here that I've drawn, and where do I want to take this? Do I want to develop it further? And a good way to give it a little more, to keep it from warping as an image. Like if you start coloring sections on a piece of inexpensive, cheap paper that you've drawn, and you start trying to color the different figures, it's going to bubble up in different ways and stretch and pull your image. If you just do a flat value on it, like just take paint right out of the tube, not much water in the brush, just enough to make the brush go hello, and then you paint it over the entirety of this illustration and let it dry, it tends to have a flat ish uniformity to the image, and then you can work on top of it in all kinds of different mixed media applications. But that was the approach here, and then it sat there. It just sort of sat there, and so every time I'm straightening up the studio, and it's in this box, and I find 8-9 more drawings or whatever. Because I do that, I'm trying to be more practical about that and sticking a lot of those thoughts and ideas that would be scribbled on whatever paper, and to try to keep them all tied up in sketchbooks. So I have a number of these going simultaneously, and I'm doing the same things in all of the books. There's, oh, I'm missing questions. I'm so sorry. Linda says, artful. That's very nice, yeah. Paul tells me to brace myself about his new book. I'm really looking forward to it, Paul. Marsh asks, do I have a daily sketchbook routine? I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think that, yeah, I think I do. Is it every day? Maybe not, but so Lori works in her office at home or in her office downtown, in her day job, and I spend my day here in the studio. And when we get home together, we'll have when she gets home and I, there's my day in the studio, and I come upstairs and join her in the kitchen, and we have dinner together, and then we'll watch some television, we'll go for walks, you know what I mean? But when we get a chance to sit down together and just decompress a little bit and talk about our day is a nice moment. But then when we're watching television, I'm not just a watch TV guy. I'm have a sketchbook in my lap and doodle like a maniac, or try to answer questions that I have in my head, visual questions, technical questions. And so because I'm watching this show, with my wife, and it's following along as we do, but it doesn't necessarily mean all my focus and attention is there, because there's a part of me that just has to scribble and doodle. And so that's where I'll have one of the sketchbooks in my lap, and I will do whatever. Outside of that, I draw during the sermons on Sunday, but I draw the sermons, right? And then it's technically a good thing. And then if we're going for long drives, and Lori's the one that's driving, I'll sketch then. If I'm the one that's driving, I, strangely enough, still have my sketchbook in the van. And that is pretty much when I'm sketching, is when I'm sitting static, is when I'll just doodle. And so that's what the result of these things are. And I'll show you. I've shown this one before. This is another one that it's the same thing. It's just doodling and ideas, and then this is the part we're going to get to today. And so this is me just drawing comic stories, comic pages, and without any real, I don't really have an intention to take this further. I just don't. These are just thumbnails and breakdowns of laying out full pages and telling stories about these characters and just exploring ideas. Now, I do a fair amount of these things, and in the course of doing so, it's just a sort of a way and a means in order to get out these ideas that are in my head and to flesh them out with a little bit of, well, how could I approach that as a story point? Or how could I develop this page? Or what would this, how would I go about, doing this image of here's a map with here's all these photographs laid over top of it, and in order to try to explain a history of a place. Or how do I draw, a scene involving a giant guy? Or, here's all these characters assembled before the king. People waking up from, being knocked out, whatever. So it's another avenue of exploration. I thought that might be something that we try today, and in an even more smaller approach is this, just an action, exploring an action of a guy drawing energy into himself, and boom, and how does that, how could I incorporate that into the structure of a page? Hi, Susanna. Welcome aboard. So that's what this all is. This is just tons of, these are camera movements that just sort of, this looking at all these different ways that you can take motion picture shots is another way for us to explore comic book panels, comic storytelling panels. And so, what can we tell using a back focus shot? And I've used this in, I incorporated this into a story page already. And so this is what this little note was applied here. In this page, the Christopher Walken replacing Jack Nicholson in The Shining, right? So, the bartender says, "Would you like a lager?" And he says, "Lager, sure." But the focus is on him and the cup is blurry. And then the next panel, I put the focus on the cup and I blur out Walken. And so that's a back front focus shot that I utilized from filmmaking. And so, even just explorations like this may well inform us of different ways that we can draw panels, similar to how I've shown on the stream before Wally Wood's 22 panels. And this is the same sort of thing, and I would highly encourage people to explore something like this, like an out of focus shot, and then I write down, there's a small little thumbnail illustration, and then I write down, it's an image out of focus, right? But a diffusion shot is when the frame is entirely diffused. And what I relate that to is like a Liz Taylor commercial. When Liz Taylor would do, try the new perfume by Liz Taylor, Stinkapoo or what, I don't know what it's called. And it would be Liz Taylor going, it's the scent that of the great old days of Hollywood. But the shot would be so diffused, and what I mean by that is it's not blurry, but it's not crisp. It has this ethereal quality to her, to this shimmering Hollywood beauty, but the truth of it is it's her hiding her age. And by diffusing the focus, it enables her to go, oh, I'm still perpetual Liz Taylor. And I think she's in her 70s at the time. 60s or 70s at the time. And rather than admitting, who we are, she's trying to sell perfume, and so she's going to use whatever tools and devices she can. But she used to do this. If you look back at old Elizabeth Taylor product commercials, they're always diffused. They're always out of focus. Oh, Frank, how you doing, sir? Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. Welcome aboard, Frank. How you doing? So that's what some of these are, like breaking the fourth wall. An example of that would be Woody Allen, or the new Deadpool movies, where he stops and looks at the camera and goes, "That doesn't seem right, does it?" Or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. All these types of films use breaking the fourth wall, where we step outside of the narrative, and he addresses us directly as the viewer, as a participant in the structure of the film. Now, it's a lot of fun. Mel Brooks, would utilize that, where you look at the camera and go, "Ooh, ooh, ooh," Frank says, or Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So all of these different devices can be used in our storytelling techniques, and so I have written down 102 of them. And it's things like stop motion, right? How do I do a stop motion shot? Well, that would be like the one page I showed you of the guy jumping, landing, and leaping off again, from the page that I showed earlier here in the stream. That would be me utilizing a stop motion shot, or it would be some kind of contrived device that is in the frame. So here's a guy standing there across the street, but then I have a halo, like a sort of holographic type image of cars going by. That would be a stop motion type of an approach, or him, halfway through the street, and all of the all the steps that he took to get to the halfway through the street are now sort of like holographic, or fading out images of himself moving. Flash comics. How do you denote somebody traveling at really fast speeds, and that you would do a sort of phase effect of multiple images of the same character as he's moving through time and space. Slow shutter is slowing down and create a motion blur. Well, motion blur is similar to what we just talked about with the cars moving across the street. So, Frank. So there's so many different approaches that could be taken. So if you get an opportunity and are interested in storytelling and are interested in breaking away from what might feel like static technique, and that you want to see some growth for yourself, explore some of this. Explore some of these alternative opportunities, some of these alternative approaches to a shot, like the shot to wow the audience, the hero or the money shot, the whole page drawing, and you're doing a 6-page story, and it ends with a nuclear explosion. It's the money shot. It's the big wow. It's the big ending. It's it's the big action. Or have a story start with somebody holding up a pistolero, and the way the shot is it's right over the barrel of a gun towards the person holding it. So it's it's one of these. Yeah, you coming? You ready to go, pal? That's the money shot. So, yeah, I can walk through these further at some point in time, but what I thought we would get into is, some of the stuff that I showed earlier, and that is breaking down some quick page doodles, some quick page illustrations. Marsh asks, have I ever read the 5 C's of cinematography? I have it, but I haven't read it yet. It's supposed to be really good for comics as well. Any exploration into cinematography, and I've got a few different books on cinematography in the house here. But any books on cinematography can only aid you in drawing sequential images. And the underlying reason for that is that those films tend not to be put together unless some visual artist has sat down with the director, producers, and tried to get outside of their head the visions that they wanted to incorporate on the film, in conjunction with maybe some of the locations that they've scouted or some of the vehicles they know that they're going to use. And so they try to figure out, how can we pace through this film in order to save ourselves an awful lot of exploration time on set by having the whole thing laid out in advance. It's called storyboarding. It's a really basic thing, right? But because of storyboarding, storyboarding is essentially drawing, comic images, comiquettes of what's going to happen in the motion picture. So that's why they go so hand in hand. And that if you study enough, if you have some measure of comprehension about how camera movements work and in relationship to how you can use some of those devices, like I detailed that in that 102 frames, if you can utilize those in your storytelling, and you can try to incorporate some of those heightened techniques of zoom focus, or pacing in a story, or drawing the focus of attention on a singular character in relationship to the space within a frame, like if it's a small person in silhouette walking down an alleyway, but the camera is got a wide lens that's picking up all of the dark alley as this person is walking off into the distance of the overly saturated, brightly lit street, and they just walk out of our view. They just disappear into the bright. There's an emotional context to that, but while you see it visually represented in motion in a film or a cartoon or television, whatever, it has one emotional sensitive get from it. But if we can figure out the static images that we can utilize to capture those key parts of it, to pick and choose those specific moments that enable us to engage in eliciting that emotional feeling, or that visual response, that visual feeling that's generated from that moving shot. And it would take a couple of panels, like here our guy is walking down the alley. The next panel is the same alley setting, but maybe he's moving towards the light a little more, like a few steps farther away from us, and then and his form is starting to wash out with the light that's beyond him, and then the next one is him just disappearing into it. So we can use that sequence of images to solicit the same response from our audience that they might get from watching that in film. So good examples of plotting out ideas that eventually get turned into motion pictures is, if you get an opportunity, Brian Hitch drew 24 issues, 2 volumes of a series called The Ultimates. I think I've shown him on the stream, but that's the Avengers movies that are out now. That a lot of those elements that were explored in the Ultimates comics, they utilize that for the films. Or Zack Snyder tried to adapt Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen, and he did so with the intention to stay loyal to the source material, this 12-issue graphic novel of what the world would really be like if there were superpowered individuals in it. And there are whole sequences of shots in his film of The Watchmen that are literally taken from the comic book. he's trying to put motion to the static action, because if you pick and choose those right moments, you can show movement through time and actions through time. Chris says the good reference for storyboarding is a book by Nancy Beeman. Prepare to board. I love it. That's a great title. Prepare to board. Everybody, all aboard. I write these two down. Seas of Cinematography. And who's that by? Well, we'll figure it out. And Prepare to Board. It's the only way I'm going to ever pronounce that, by the way. By Nancy Beeman. Seas of Cinematography. Cookies. Cake. Cookies, but different kind. Christopher. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I don't think I have the right ones. So let's take Coca-Cola. There we go. So let's take this approach. And so the other part that I wanted to sort of get across here is that in doing these sort of mini breakdowns, mini layouts, they don't have to be this pretty. Let's just start with that. They don't have to be in any way trying to be really representative. But one of the things that we can explore here, Joseph Maselli, thank you, Marsh. Chocolate, Linda, I'm forgetting all the important C's. Thank you very much for that one. Maselli. Hey, it's Joey. Anyways, so what we can explore here, and what some of these examples I hope show, is we can explore and shake up our page layouts. It's one thing for us to draw, like I talked about this week, static panels, breaking down a page into a template, one large panel, two equal size panels, 4 panels of equal size, 9 panels of equal size, 6 panels, whatever variations, and then combinatory engagements between those, like a big wide panel on the top and 3 small panels in the middle, and 2 mid-sized panels at the bottom, and wonderful. All of these different objective approaches to drawing static framed panels. There's absolutely, don't ever let anybody tell you there's anything wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But another thing that we can do, and Will Eisner started doing this back in the early days of comic books with The Spirit. And if you get an opportunity, look up Will Eisner. And he would break out frame of reference. So we've got our piece of paper, and let's get into a book. I'm going to show you this on sketch in one of the sketchbooks. So he would take, all right. So if this is our piece of paper, it's our overall frame of reference, right? And I'll move in so we can see this a little clearer. Boink, boink. All right. So if this is our overall frame of reference, whatever we put within the confines of this is that's our playground for our single page storytelling image. And we can utilize this in a number of different ways. We can create, like we talked about earlier this week, a number of repetitive equal panels on the page. This is called a 9-panel format. You can do as many variations and combinations, however many panels you want. But what we have happening on a page laid out like this is, if you look at each of these as a note, this page is I think it's 9. This is equal rhythm. Each of these actions is the same size. Because each of these frame of reference are the same size. So each of the things that you draw in there are going to have the same, objectively the same amount of time, applied to them. and then, you know, with that, a larger image, it's a longer note. You know, so this image has more time given it to it, right? So if you look at pacing and storytelling in this way, this is really clearly defined, because you can see visually a static rhythm, right? What is Scott McCloud material here? Well, he's not the first one to have done it, and he's not going to be the last. Steranko did it, some of it before McCloud, but McCloud's really technical. Okay, so pacing is this, right? And if you look at it like that, then you have an understanding of pace. But where the departure comes in, and you make it more of your own, is where you start allowing yourself. Oh, thank you, by the way, frankly. I missed your comment. That's very nice of you. But when you start breaking away from the conformity of the static image, the static square rectangle frame of reference, that border around your panel and the image have to be contained within it, we can break out from that and explore the real estate of our page in different ways in order to engage the viewer's eye to move around. So in a page like this, that I've got on the screen now, where these figures are breaking outside of the panel here and here on these two sides, just to draw us in on more of that action of what's going on, of all of these different people waking up. And it gives a little more room, a little more real estate, just a little more of something to the panel itself, to the drawing itself. We're not locking ourselves into that square shape. We're allowing our image to express itself out of that. Because in this context, our frame of reference for this page is that first thing that I showed you a couple minutes ago, and that is the entire page itself. And so all the stuff that's confined within it, you know, those are our smaller frame of reference. But because we have this large and broad one, and now we're utilizing these shapes and breaking the form of them in order to just allow ourselves to enhance our image, to explore it more. In this case, this figure, as she's standing here, rather than cut the line across here, I just broke her out and dropped it a little bit lower. Is there any reason for that? No. Her hand moving into this panel there's a reason for this, though. As you read this panel, and the text leads your eye across here, okay? And then objectively, you move back towards this figure here, because we look for the faces, and these bodies, the line slightly, very suggestively, there's these little movements that take us back to the face, so the next direction in the storytelling. So her hand leading into this panel leads you from here, right, Western world, left to right, and you move across here, you go back down to there, but her hand and her body dropping into this panel, rather than skipping across to here, leads your eye downwards. And the motion of this person grabbing two other individuals and running as fast as they can is objectively what you're chasing after now. And from there, you follow the body back up to the face, and there's the text that leads us into the next part, and to this figure who's bordering right outside the page. Now, whatever my initial intention was, if it was instead of this form to draw this form, I don't know. Probably, though, because I like this a lot better than this, which is probably what that arrow is trying to say. Use this one. But we've moved our eye around the page, and more importantly, we're moving the reader's eye in the way we want, but we're doing it in a fun way. So if I were to take another value, like a line like so, and put it throughout the page, and then to fill this void in and to fill this void in with a flat black or something like that. It just gives a little more volume to that page so people don't feel like there's wasted areas. Now, with the space that's left here, the intention is to have the reader, follow bing, bong, bing, like this. Here she is, there she is, there's her writing, and there's her writing. And so we use this basically dead space idea to fit in text, right? So, but the point is that all of these panels, we understand the principles of them, but by allowing ourselves not to have to be conformed to these simple geometric shapes of squares and rectangles, by allowing ourselves to break out of these, we're engaging in a page that, at the very least, for us as a creator, is more interesting. Small panel focusing in on the eyes, the face of the main guy, and then our perspective expands out to see him sitting in his chair and all of these individuals gathered around him as he speaks probably some dramatic thing, right? Everybody, I'm really tired of you all going through the toilet paper as quickly as you are, and we need to address this, or whatever he's talking about. Chris says, hi everyone, I missed fixing lunch here. Oh, what do we have? Marsh says, the negative space brings rest for the eye and also draws the focus to the panels. Indeedly do. Indeedly do. It gives rest for the eye, yes, but it draws the focus to the text as we lay that over the negative space. So if we, in this case, where we're utilizing what would be dead air, in here is actually a place for us to bring our text and just allow these action lines to not be interfered with. So it's, you're right, it's sort of like a break, but it's not. We're keeping the intensity up by making the text move our eye around the kinetic stuff that we're trying to draw. Troy's saying hi. So in this panel, but yeah, if you utilize negative space in the right way, it definitely is a pause. It's a break. It's a moment. That's what the space between panels are, is that in between in the rhythm. So in a page like this, where we've got a smaller panel, I could draw it all the way across and put a line underneath it. But having it inside here, it's just more visually exciting to me, right? And if it works for the viewer, great. Then we open it up. We've brought that shot, the tighter shot, in an open, wider scene. Here's all the people assembled around him as he's complaining about how much gas they've been using when they borrow his car, whatever it is. And then we flip the shot to these two guys. Now, rather than using another panel underneath again, like we've got here, rather than using that kind of a shape underneath, like we have any other page, I've pushed it up inside, and so this tells you 1, 2, 3. Even though this one's pushed up inside, this one's pushed farther inside. And so because it's pushed farther up inside, I'm telling you where to go. So while there will be all this text and all this conversation back and forth, the visual elements are ideally moving your eye across. It's almost like a scoop over to here, or this guy says, all right, I did it, Daddy, you happy? I don't know what his dialogue is, but it's just another way of having more fun with the space on the page itself than looking at comics as square to square to square to square. So more examples of this, but I want to jump over to this bottom one. In the top panel, here's the building, peeking out of and using the background buildings as a framing device of a flat value, so that these buildings all have a uniform tone and they're pushed back. Our focus is here on this building in the foreground that is on fire, and that fire moves across the page and rests above the top of all these other frames. It's not the key point of thing because there's no dialogue and text over top of it. Text, position 1, position 2, position 3. So it's just, and then position 4, the command diner. So it's just different shots of what's going on with the building. And it's just sort of setting the scene for where all the characters are that we're going to be following in this story. And it ends here at the command place, the command diner, it says. And so there'll be an external shot of the diner looking through a window. And then we immediately move inside. So despite giving these key 4 locations in advance to this one, the diner, we're just setting the overall scene, and then we're focusing on this one, and then what happens next all takes place within here. And so it's a sort of sneaky way, instead of doing a big image and hoping that people are going to spend the time to look around inside big image to try to find what's going on. Let's just do 4 illustrations of location and then have that text carry us across, and that dialogue can go to the person who's standing in the window, and then as we go into the next shot, you can have a concluding statement being made. So he says, okay, so and so's there, such and such is there, the person's here, we've got to put some people there, we got everybody in place. Does that sound good? And we know that if he says, does that sound good, it's this person who we see the back of their head, and then we see them sitting in the chair. And ideally, that can make our reader understand that those different things are all being said by that person. And it's just a different way of showcasing a lot of complicated information and tying it together in a clean little way, but doing so in a limited amount of space. And then we get into the big dialogue of these people planning what they're going to do. And then here's the responsive action, because we're going to have a piece of dialogue that says, hey, well, the long faces. And then the next panel cuts over to this person that these people are all looking at, is like, we got this thing in the bag, babies, or whatever he's saying, I don't know. But, look, come on, I got a fancy watch, we got time. Again, whatever the dialogue is notwithstanding at the moment, but the illustration of exploring different ways to interpret ideas is this sort of idea. Marsh says, yeah, text can go there as well, that makes sense. I'm really digging this discussion. Far out, man. Really digging having them with you. So we can look at different kinds of panels, like rather than looking at just the square form, we can have the character that stands and breaks out of that mold of it, and we just utilize what was our frame of reference. It's still a framing device, but we can put a flat color in here, and that flat color in here, and when utilizing colors, that can have an emotional quotient. Colors express emotion. There's association of color and emotions, and so and we all kind of subconsciously know them in a really weird kind of way. It's the reason that we choose colors for the way that we utilize them today. So if you have a green background here and the person has a sour face, then the conversation about poo-poo butt, or in the whole floor of the house stinking because of somebody's using the facility or something, the green background and the sort of aspect of green, whether jealous or toxic or whatever association is for green, it just enhances what's going on within the panel. The breaking of this panel doesn't have a specific purpose other than it's more interesting. If you've got somebody who's standing here, he's got his arms crossed and he's looking like the tough guy with his legs spread out, and he's standing here looking resolute, and you've got this person's dialogue and saying, was it you? ? It's like, and then we've got this panel of this guy standing there, and his no. And the reason that no is down here at the bottom instead of being up top like this dialogue is, was it you, the accusation, that strange spacing of, it's this really strange thing, but
just not putting it right here and putting it down below, believe it or not, gives a pause when the reader is looking at it. If they put it up here, if you put it up there and you read this, was it you? No. Then here when you read, was it you? And then you see their persona. You see the arms crossed and the scowling face with their arms spread out in defiance. And underneath that it says, no. But you read the person before you read the words. And that's the fusion of comics and visuals and textual elements used together. So having an open-faced panel just enhances that, right? It's just sort of, because here he is. Your only focus is on this guy and his, standing there with his legs open and stupid, It's a really weird thing, but it's a way to just keep the focus directed entirely on this person here and nothing around them. Chris, did you take art in school, and how did you do? So I went to high school, and I went to a place called BL Art, and BL Art was basically all day doing art classes in high school. That was it. And you could do basically what would be considered an OAC year or a year 5 in high school, where it was just art, and then go on to university and college. And in many universities in Canada would forgive you first year, a large amount of your first year classes, because it was so immersive doing an entire year of art school at a high school level. And I never went farther than that for school. Everything else is reading. It's an excessive amount of reading and learning and applying myself to things and learning more things than just the specific thing I want to do. The more that we read, this goes back to the Northrop Frye conversation yesterday, the more that we read, the more that we intake new ideas and new thoughts and new levels of understanding of those things, the more that it expands our ability to engage in stuff and to understand how things work. So I'm a nerd, but no, I didn't specifically go to an art school. I just did the extensive art program in high school. So, but thanks for asking, Jim. That's very nice of you. Okay, so here's an open panel example, just to keep it more interesting. If we look at the same panel shape, and depending on what we want, we can utilize a different combination of panels that directs the eye. Where are you? Where are you, Peppy? I'm just joking. His name's Derwin. There he goes. Boy, that thing makes a lot of noise. So if we draw a page here, the eye moves. We can control how the eye moves while using a bunch of discordant images for our panel shapes. So you would start at the top, because that tends to be our preference, is to start at the top of a story page, whether it is in a portrait or a landscape format. So we start here, but because it overlaps this panel here, it's almost like it's an arrow, so that we go there. But because it's the Western world, this open-faced panel of an image, we can have, let's have a guy falling from the sky. Whoop, right? So we read this as number 3. But because we're following this axis here, there's our number 4, and here is our number 5. Now we can also do this, where we just draw the line straight across the page, and all of this is number 5. So the basic understandings that we want is we start here, we end here, and we consider the pacing to get us from that point to that point. the variations that we use for the panel shapes. What we're trying to do with our panels is have those key moments in the action. So if that's guy smiles, right? He stands on the edge of the building right here with his arms out. He says, "I'm gonna do it." He stands here on the edge of the building with his arms out. The next panel is him falling from the top of the building, and here his wings pop open and he starts to fly, and then the final panel is him flapping away, and a little view of the city as he goes, "Told ya!" So those 4 actions, the intent, the first part of it, the first part of the action itself of stepping up to the edge, the falling off, the wings opening, and the flying away, the resolution of it, the resolution of the intended action. So if we look at whatever it is that we're trying to tell in our story, and we look at those key moments and the pacing of them, right, and in a different ways that we do the execution of those two elements. So whatever your story is, and whatever it is that you're trying to draw and try to break down in pages, these are the things that I consider when I'm doing 1-page stories. And so this becomes that sort of dialogue that's going on in your head, dialectic action that, this is what I'm processing through here inside my noggin, while executing one image to the next. Yesterday's page was Tim's. I started off with shoes and Tim's. The suggestion was, in order to get Tim's narrow size 12 shoes, it feels like we have to travel to an alternate universe to get them. So we start off with shoes, and over top of shoes I wrote the word Tim's. So the second panel that proceeds underneath with the shoes is drawing the shoe store. Now the title Tim's stretches across both, because this is the way I drew the store in the center of the panel to draw you from here to here. I left this space up above in the sky. Well, the dialogue of the title itself can spread across that now, because it's not going to interfere with anything if it does, because right here at the bottom of the shoes is our first piece of dialogue, and right here under the store is our second piece of dialogue. And so because of ideally, let me switch things up just a little bit here, and I'll take you over to it. So because of laying the page out this way, optimally, I've got you're starting with the title. We look for the big words first. There's the shoes, but then we go down to the bottom of the shoes, and there's the first piece of dialogue, right? Tim wears size 12 narrow shoes. Even though we're partially covering up the image itself with the text describing the context of it. Tim's shoes. Tim wears size 12 narrow shoes. So we're really trying to reinforce and drive home the idea. Tim wears size 12 narrow shoes. Here they are. We need to go and get some. Because the next panel is the shoe store, AR shoes. Right? However you read that, I got some funny comments on about what that looked like it read yesterday during the breakdowns of it. So the next thing it says is, I don't remember what the next thing is. It says the best place in the area to find them is right here. And we've drawn a parking lot. We've drawn the front of the store. AR shoes, shoe store. So then when we step inside the shoe store and we continue our narrative, and we take the reader to the larger elements that we introduce along the way. So we've started with Tim's shoes. He buys them here in the front of the store, regular stuff, but in the back of the store, that's where you can really find the stuff you want. And then, of course, the back of the store is a dimensional portal that takes you to a place where there's giant shoes, and you try to kidnap their children and come back. Ha ha! Try to grab them in pairs. So we start with mundanity and we go off into the crazy, which I tend to do. But what it does for us is that as a writer and an illustrator, we can take whatever flight of fancies we want. Let's be honest. It's our story. It's our conviction to follow it through and to express it and to share it with others. Somebody, in this context for me, here's a suggestion, try to undertake that as a story. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to do so. And, I will look at the literal applications of the story and the expression of Tim wears size 12 narrow shoes. It's like we have to go to an alternate universe to find them. Okay, I got it. Tim, narrow size 12 shoes, got to go to an alternate universe. It feels like we got to go to an alternate universe to find it. Well, let's take that feeling and then just go with it completely, and let's go to some sort of doorway at the back of a shoe store that takes us to an alternate universe where we find the shoes we're looking for. The additional implications of these are giant shoe people that he's confronted by, and he can see little smatterings of tiny pairs of shoes around his feet, and their, feet, they are shoes, giant shoe people. And he's kidnapping their children and coming back to the universe. Try to grab them in pairs. That's cheeky and nonsensical, but it's just a following through of a narrative device from what could have been going to a shoe store and having it be a weird looking shoe store and everybody in there looks like they're from Mars. I mean, that would be another way to depict it. Feels like we're in an alternate universe because of the exotic attire, the exotic sort of features of all the people that work there. The lady that's been 102 years old since you were a child shopping there and you're now middle-aged. But she hasn't aged a day. She still looks like she's 102 years old, though. Is this another planet? There's a number of different ways that we can tell the same story. But some of those devices that we can use along the way just to keep a little pep in our step as we go. First panel of the title card, basically, Tim's, there's the shoe, and our dialogue carries us over into the next panel, which is lower than. It's almost like an arrow. Down in the bottom right corner, taking us into this panel here. Here's the shoe place. We follow our dialogue this way. But that overlaps this other panel. Now it can be a little bit larger because it can. It's up to us. But there's a little arrow movement again in that corner panel, the corner of that second panel, peeking us in the top and the bottom into this next panel. Right? The next panel, we can have a gutter between the two. We can give ourselves a moment from this whole leaping business. And it's like Marsh said earlier, those spaces between, that negative space, can give us a moment. And in this case, that moment, which, Marsh, I'm pleased that you pointed it out. It forces a pause. It's almost like a semicolon. And that the next thing I tell you is that if you go to the back, there's where the good shoes are. And the back is almost like this highway to heaven moment like you used to see on the Michael Landon program, where it's like, here he is walking on the highway and the edge of the highway starts glowing. Ooh, right? But that pause allows us a moment before narratively and visually we say this. We take this turn in our narrative from here's a shoe, if you go in front of the store, shoe store, we're illustrating examples of shoes, and then we're doing the same in that final panel in that top row, but the difference being is that this isn't normal. It's not a normal shoe store. We've taken the mundane 1, 2, 3, and now we're giving ourselves a pause before we step into something more than that. Let me be 100% honest with you. Did I think a lot about that? No. When I was putting the page together, I didn't. It just, after a while, and you draw enough of these approaches to storytelling, you start to intuit certain things, and you start to just trust yourself and go with, I'm going to put a pause right here and then draw this crazy panel. Do you think much about the pause? No. It just sort of, it fits in your head. We move down to the next part of the page. Here you are flying through space. I don't want to define the space for you specifically, other than utilizing the zipatone that I did in order to dequantify the space. And I'm not having to show all the elements or showing you falling through the sky or whipping up in the air, because the reader's viewpoint on that is always going to be more interesting than ours. The only weird thing I did was he's not wearing shoes. He's flying through this space feet first because it's all about shoes. So having him falling or flying feet first, that's just fun. I'm having fun. And here he is feet first. And however he landed or not, doesn't matter. That's up to you as the reader. You're going to fill in that part of the adventure. But what we do know is that in this key moment in time that we lead right into by having that feet first guy breaking through the panel gives a better sense of movement if he isn't confined within the panel. His arms sticking out of there, his feet, his one foot's moving right across the space, right across the pause, into the next panel where he's standing there, hands up, big giant feet people, and little feet people scattered amongst them. Is there any deeper meaning to that? It's more interesting, moves the space along, moves us around, but you've got larger image breaking out of the panel in number 1, pushing itself into number 2 where we have these giant feet, and here he is in front of them, but it's this big wide shot. Same amount of pace, by the way, same amount of space and time as the previous panel to it. Why? You eventually, after you play enough with these things, you just sort of intuit that that's the amount of space I'm going to use. But the smaller compressed panel at the end, where he's got a bunch of shoes in his arms, and he's not even in shot, but we're not going to draw his face or anything else like that, because even the face that we have shown is shadowed out, because I want it to be about Tim. Linda's talking about Tim, her son, and so I don't know what Tim looks like. So I'm not going to clearly represent Tim in the page, because for this way, Linda, and I hope you don't mind, for Linda, that's Tim, because she can fill in those gaps. And in this, because I appreciate the suggestion that they got to go and find these size 12 shoes, then it's about Tim. But for the rest of us, it's not clearly about Tim, because anybody else can look at this guy, who coincidentally is named Tim, because this is about Tim's shoes for us as well, but it can be about the Tims that we might know, because he isn't clearly defined. We don't see his face in the last panel. We don't see his face clearly, in the 5th panel, the bottom left corner. So you can fill in your Tim of choice, who goes to another universe and grabs a bunch of baby alien space shoes and just try to grab them in pairs, because the whole idea is about getting footwear here. It's a weird story, and I recognize that it's weird, and I recognize that it takes big leaps and departures, but I'm just trying to utilize this as our example in correlation to some of the stuff that we're talking about here. And so when we look at these different space breaks, and we look at these different layouts and these different elements of shapes that we can use in telling our stories, when you're drawing and when you're taking a moment for yourself and taking the approach to try to tell a story in a limited amount of space or an expansive amount of space, you got 50 pages for this thing, you can take as much time as you want to tell about whatever the action is in your story. Somebody's stunk up the house and he's accused the other person, and no, it wasn't me. So, or the person jumping off a roof, popping wings out of their back and flying off into the horizon. It doesn't matter what it is. But the one thing I encourage people to do is to explore the space of the page that you have, and don't be too precious and don't be too worried about sticking to a routined format action, 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 because you can have the key elements, the key moments in your action, down here, your key moments, and you can paste those out on the rooftop, standing on, I'm going to do it, steps up onto the corner of the building. And we're representing that really roughly because these are thumbnails, right? These are simple drawings to break out and explore ideas like we've done here. But our thumbnail here isn't so small. It's a little more clearly defined. But this is just telling tighter pictures, but it's accomplishing the same thing. Look at this as a step 1 and build it up a little bit bigger as a step 2. They're doing the same thing. And whatever you feel comfortable to do, whatever feels more fluid to you, do it like this, or do it a little more fancy and advanced. If you're going to do it a little more fancy and advanced, you want to have a clear idea of the structure of it in the first place. So allow yourself to do 5 or 10 different versions of it at this size before you pick and choose the one that you're going to do a little more clearly. You can then take that one, scan it, put it in Photoshop, blow it up to the size of the image that you want it to be, and put another layer over it and draw it really clearly, or just blow it up and print it out to the size of piece of paper that you want to draw on. Put that underneath the piece of paper that you want to draw on. You got the structure of the whole thing laid out. Put it underneath a light table. Like this is a light table that I have here, which is a modern kind of one where it's very, very thin. And it's just, you plug it in, you press the button, and this is a light. The whole thing is one light. This also does a really great job of this fantastic tool that I have beside me, and that's a window. Tape your 2 pieces of paper to the window and use the most powerful light that there is outside, right? The sun. Linda says she loved how I envisioned the story. Oh, well, I'm glad, Linda. I appreciate that. Because when people give suggestions, a lot of the time I keep those people in mind when I'm doing the one-page stories. And, here's Jim's suggestion about a guy playing guitar while riding a horse on the edge of a fourth-dimensional parallax. So, it's with Jim in mind that I drew the story of a couple of guys talking about their cool film, and I try to give them some sort of Californian surfer dialectic and said, bro, okay, so here's our film, right? And give them that cliche television Hollywood voice, or Californian voice of, bro, so we're making a movie, right? Me and my friend Bingo. And he's like, what's up? So they're those guys. And then the science dude, right? And so as I'm drawing these elements that they're putting in their film, and our science dude, right? He's like, hey, dude, it's got to be this kind of a way. And then I interject, and I interfere with the page, and I say, look, listen, whatever you get up to with your friends on your own recreation time, it doesn't mean the film's going to make any sense to anybody else. And it's from the suggestion of a horse riding a bike on the edge of a fourth-dimensional parallax. If I numbered my pages and did a content, it might be easier and less of the paper swiping sounds, and I apologize. So, hey, what's up? My name is Rod, and this is my bro Bingo. Sup? We're here for funding for a sci-fi movie. Yo. So picture, right? This cool crazy horse, And so this panel, right into this panel, the horse leads right over it. But that doesn't interfere art-wise because we're following the narrative, and it's so dense that it takes precedence over the pictures. So this picture, right? This cool crazy horse, he's riding on a space bike just jamming. So there he is. Bird jam, or the horse jamming on the bike. And he's just jamming. What's it called? A cello. It's a type of guitar. I'm cheating a little bit. Jim will let me cheat. Jim will let me cheat because Jim's a good guy. What's it called? A cello? So then a science guy says, and then we pull into this panel with our dialogue. Right here to right here. and we're breaking the rule, but we're moving left to right, but we've done it with this downward sweep and draw you back up visually and textually together in this joint action. This crazy business of the fourth dimensional parallax thing that Jim decided to insert into the suggestion, I'm trying to define that here. What it is, it's more like if you do a rotating image around a light source, and inside of that image you have a whole bunch of illustrations of a horse moving through space, and then you spin that with the light and you look through the little slats and the little gaps. This parallactic device lets you see that horse move. I just made giant light crystals in the center. So I'm messing with the suggestion that Jim gave me and incorporating real devices with enhanced fictitious devices. So then a science guy says, the space crystals are unaligned. Heed the cosmic horse's warnings. And then they both say, righteous, our bros can love that part. And then I interrupt. Before we even get to the responsiveness to their own action, my hand interferes with that panel here and says, stop. So whether you read this or not in the first go, maybe you read it on the second, it's just giving you a little more play time with the page. If you go back through it again and the second time you see the guys go, righteous, our bros love that. Or you spend more time looking at the image of the horse in the drawings. Stop. The ideas that you come up with during your recreation time, they might be nonsense to others. And then it's me interfering in my own page and putting myself there saying, I got to draw a horse riding a bicycle while playing a guitar, though. That's for me. That's, because I know that Jim Luan, who suggested the page, he enjoys this sort of silly fun. He wouldn't have any problem with me interrupting my own page and saying, and being the guy that I'm in, the type of a guy similar to the characters are like, bro, me and Bingo are going to tell you about our movie. I'm kind of that guy too, so, dude, that's cool, right? So, whatever flight of fancy we take, the way that we use shapes, and here's this sneaky, cheeky thing that I did in here is put an extra panel in. And optimally, somebody here has noticed the extra panel. If anybody, I'll give you a moment. If anybody that might be watching, where's the extra panel? Can anybody describe that to me on this page? Jim says that one is a Hall of Fame, Chris. I'm glad you like it, Jim. Can anybody tell me where the extra panel is? I know this isn't a teacher-student moment. It's just fun. Have fun. Does anybody see the extra panel? It's a very sneaky thing. The bike. Yeah, it's the bike. The bike it's a free-floating panel that punches out within the larger frame of the bike. This panel, the main panel, goes all the way across the page. The stars, the space business, all of it is behind, right? The science guy, it's behind the righteous dudes. It's behind me interrupting and me saying, that was fun. The different colored background, flat value background, the stop sign behind my head, this is all shape language of me playing. Thank you for guessing that correctly, Marsh. But the bike and a focus on the bike. Panel draws you down to panel, moves you diagonally across the panel, stop. It's a really subversive little elements that we can put in for our own edification. It doesn't necessarily mean anybody else is going to pick up on these elements at all. But when we're doing our creative exploration and our storytelling approaches, we're having fun. It's for us, right? The interaction, the engagement, in this context, Jim's suggestion for the horse on a bike. In the other context of Linda suggesting Tim's adventure to find shoes, and her adventure subsequently with him. But the suggestion of the page and how we apply it. Here's the base. Let's play. Let's have fun. Let's jam with a horse on a bike. Or whatever context that we're using, whatever tools that we want to, and exploring panel breakdowns in different ways than this, and adding elements like these, and playing with more things like a stop sign when I say the word stop. It is red. It's a muted kind of red that works chromatically with the green, but it is red, right? And, and then that secondary pause of that cream value, which again works chromatically, and I've already snuck it into the page, it does a little halo line around Rod and Bingo. That cream color is already there. The stop, the impact of the red, and how it works as a complementary value to the muted green that's the base value of our page, far more than the black, which you would think it would be, but it's the green. Red, that's the whole point of that, is to make you stop. Stop. I said stop. I showed you stop. There's a stop sign, right? It's so silly, but it's subversive language, because and if you're an adult that recognizes stop sign means stop the car, don't run over people, stop and look before you drive into the oncoming cars, whatever. But I do it twice, and I do it in really sneaky ways. One, stop, hand up, stop sign. And then I get you again with the cream color, makes you stop. And my thumb goes, hey, and takes you back and goes, horse, right? Pushes you back into the page again. It's almost like I'm encouraging a person to read the page again. Get back in there. It's a horse on a bike. I drew a horse on a bike. Whether you paid any attention to that in the initial reading of the page, I went, oh, horse riding, playing a cello. Okay. Science guy says, get back in there. That's a horse on a bike. We can do whatever we want in our storytelling, and I highly encourage you to do whatever you want in your storytelling. It's your story. You're telling it to somebody else. You're doing it with the efforts that you make in your narrative techniques. You're doing it with the efforts that you make in visualizing elements that you incorporate within those. You're doing it by utilizing some of these tools, or tools that other people will take even farther, like Marsh reading Scott McCloud. I have Scott McCloud's books. I haven't got through one of them. Not true. I have. It's Jot. I've actually got through his actual comic. I can't get through understanding comics and reimagining comics. Can't get through them. They're way too technical. I can skim through them visually, but I can't read all that technical jazz, because I find that it sort of breaks down for me way too much of the creative engagement of application of process. But I get it. I look at it and I search and I chase it down myself in exploring that, looking at other people's works, and skimming through Scott's thing. But Scott's is even way too technical for me. Marsh says, how intentional are you about your overall color palette? I feel you can tell Christopher Runciman comic just from the use of color. I appreciate that, Marsh. I really do. We all gravitate towards tones and values and colors that make us comfortable. We all do. You have a preference of colors that say Marsh. Marshall likes these colors. Jim does with his work. He has an intentional use of colors that say Jim. He uses certain blues. He uses certain greens and reds. Just to use the three of us as examples, and I hope Jim and Marsh don't mind. And I highly recommend you look at work by both of these creators. It's the same thing for how anybody else. Tori, who's here in the stream, if you have a moment to take a look at how Tori uses colors in her work. The Artful Dabbler. Please look up The Artful Dabbler, and I hope you don't mind me giving away your name, Tori. But look up how she uses color in her composition. Look up how everybody here uses color in their composition, because let's be honest, the majority of us that engage specifically in streams like mine or any of the individuals that are here, we all create. We all share of ourselves in the creative endeavors that we produce. It's a form for us to communicate with the people around us. And storytelling techniques that we might utilize with visual and textual elements incorporated together in whatever measure that we do it. helps us to take it a step farther, and realizing that the co-union of art and word together is an additional way that, it's a tertiary language, the fusion of those two things together. I said stop. I held my hand up, which is a gestural image that says stop, and I put a stop sign behind my head in that panel. I don't know how much more clear I can be than I want you to stop for a second. Pause. I could have said pause too, but stop is more direct. Stop. Stop sign, hand up, stop. Is there malicious intent in that? No. It's because my face is like, stop. All right, stop, bro. Stop. It's crazy. It's silly fun. It's silly fun that I'm having. Ideally, I'm sharing with you that silly fun in the same joviality that I feel as I'm expressing this crazy, bro, look, I'm in the page. I actually put me in this page because the craziest idea standing to this day I've been given to draw a panel. I just showed you. I love it. I don't shy away from it. I have nothing but good feelings about it. But that's in this book because that's fun, and all the ideas that I get are fun, honestly. Why? Because they got to go through this fun filter right up here in the noggin, however malicious they might be in. I got a page suggested to me before that's in my previous book, and we're going to wrap up around this. Marsh says that's true. I can tell Jim's work by his colors too. That and Jim's incredibly stylistic approach to his storytelling. It's not just the way he draws; it's the way he tells stories. And we all of us, when you do enough stuff, right? If it's one drawing, if it's 3 drawings, suddenly it's you, and it shows through in your work. In my last book that I put out, and Marsh, I know you have a copy of it, but in my last book, which was also coincidentally titled The One-Page Story Extravaganza, Volume 1, but it was in a soft format, in a portrait format, okay? It wasn't the hardcover book that, in the landscape format that this is, and that's why I allowed it to have the same title as we make the leap away from what I used to do in comics and what I'm doing now. But in my previous book, somebody suggested to me, and I've always felt that suggestion had a bit of their own experience in it, and that is when a male vulture cheats on its mate, and maybe it's how I'm reading it, but when a male vulture cheats on its mate, the entire flock attacks him. Okay, so that can be taken in a really negative way. It can be. When somebody cheats on their partner, everybody around them goes after them. Maybe that person's had experience or maybe not. Maybe I'm reading into it. But when we make a suggestion, like when somebody cheats on somebody else, and anybody that's experienced something like that, it's not a great feeling. It's just not. There's a feeling of unsurety about self when somebody else around you denies yourself for others. It's a real human thing. And when you experience that, you carry it. But you can move beyond it, right? But in this expression of when a male vulture, and the fact they used the vulture might just be their favorite bird, might just be a key piece of interesting information about vultures that's similar to a human condition. But when a male vulture cheats on its partner, the flock attacks him. And so in the case of this page, let me see if I can find it fast. Yeah, I can. It's in book 4, and it was just sitting there beside it. So I have 4 collections of the 73 books that we've put out with RP. And I don't know what to do because this doesn't fit in it. So in the previous book, the one-page extravaganza, everything's in portrait format. It's just more suggestions. Today's not going as I intended. And I talked about the suggestion was people repeat the same cycles. So today's not going, person's in a car crash, and while they're in a car crash, the narrative is about, sometimes things aren't going the way you want, but, if you just try it again, it's going to work out fine. And the last thing I said is smooth sailing then, as the car is careening off a cliff. So we can do all kinds of things with stories. We can tell 2 different stories with the same page. In a society of vultures. Hello, Larry. Hey, Carl. Bob. You fellas seen any meat? So I'm Carl, and I make you read it there first because it's above here. Yep. You got any meat? Focus, Bob. How's Marlene, Carl? Why? We've already established, who's who, right? Because this is Carl. Hello, Larry. That's Larry. Hey, Carl. That's Carl. Now we're focusing on Carl. And how's Marlene, Carl? Why? Because all anyone can talk about is you flapping around with Emma. Right? Not a good call, Carl. The balloon goes back over here. The image carries over despite the pause. We want that to be a point. So we stay in there. Pause. Not a good call, Carl. Or I say we eat them. There's the interjection. Right? That's Bob. Bob's all about the food. We've already established Bob's about the food twice. I say we eat them. Or we shame them, which is a form of attack. It's a form of attack. Right? I'm technically completing the suggestion. Well, let's let the flock decide. Here's a shot of the whole flock. Everybody's flying around in a circle. Everybody's saying, shame, 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 shame. And we zoom in on it closer. Shame, shame, shame. It's more aggressive. It's an attack. And at the end, Carl flies away. The court of public opinion has decided. That's the biggest leap I took with the most specific suggestion in my last book. And in this one, it's the horse and the bike and the guitar and the 4th dimensional parallax. So you can have fun, and you can take real leaps away from the source and the suggestion itself. But at the same time, you're still doing it, right? A friend, Chris Raymer, has suggested that he thinks that my style of working on stories is I hit the suggestion, I do it directly, but it's almost like I'm shooting my storytelling arrow at it, but I'm just hitting it on the target. I'm hitting the bullseye, but I'm hitting it on the target just to the left of it. I think that works. Today's suggestion. Let me pick one out, and then I'll get crack-a-lacking on it and get it done this weekend for Monday. Because I promise you a page a day, right? So, Monday, I need to have Teletubbies are Power Rangers in their larval form. That's the kind of suggestion that my friend Chris Reamer gives me. Teletubbies are Power Rangers in their larval form. That'll be the page. There it is there. That's the suggestion. It's highlighted because I haven't done it yet. I did a snowflake with hands on every arm for Josh Kimball and Dickie C. God. That was suggested by somebody that goes by Palindrome, which is very fun. And Dee Dee said anything that has to do with Corbin. Rachel said shoulder pads gone wild. I've done all these. Teletubbies are Power Rangers in their larval form. So that ought to be Monday's page. All right. I hope this helped. I just wanted to talk a bit about sketching up page ideas and engaging with you on that and interacting and sharing some ideas along the way. Just because sometimes it's fun to say, hey, look at me, I'm doing a thing. Watch me do my thing. Shiny me. To me, personally, it's more interesting to say, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this thing from your ideas. It's important that I let you in on how, because I don't believe, and I think that a lot of people that I engage with on a regular basis don't believe in hoarding the secret knowledge. That's not what's important. What's important is if I'm storytelling and this is my process and how I engage in it, I want to share it with you so you can do it too. Because I know you can. And I love seeing when you do. However you do it, I love seeing it. Cool beans. Okay, that's it for me today. I will be back 2 o'clock Monday afternoon. 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time in North America. Okay, 2 p.m. And let's have some more fun. If you have a one-page story idea or suggestion that you want to make, 3-word prompts, a random piece of dialogue, a weird notion in your head, please, this is a safe place that we're all interacting together. Feel free. Share that with me here in the the stream, here on the video if you're watching it after the stream's over, in the comments on Instagram, Facebook, and my Patreon where I shared the original art. All of it's under my name, Runciman, or variation therein, RUNCMAN. And I drop the I in some things. Have fun. Do your thing. Share it with everybody else. Let's all communicate with one another. Have fun doing it. But thanks very much for spending the time with me today and having a good time doing it. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday. Bye for now. Thanks, Chris. Chris, that's fine too.